Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
In this podcast, we cover both eating disorders and sexual assault. If this is something that you are triggered by or something that you are going through, we just want to make sure that you are aware that we're going to be talking about these things in the podcast. And if you are someone who's struggling, we highly recommend you to reach out to Butterfly Foundation or Lifeline and make sure that you are getting help, because there is help to get.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Women's Fitness Academy podcast. I am your host. My name is Ellen. I'm a binge and body image coach and also an educator for Women's Fitness Academy. I am here today with the beautiful and amazing and stunning and super cool woman, Madi Grace. And I feel like when you look up the word girl power, it should be like a picture of you. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
I appreciate it. It's been a wild ride, but I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, the reason why I wanted to interview you is I feel like we had such a good chat even before we even started recording. But I just feel like there's so many people out there who basically just post what they think people want to see. And what I like about your page is that you're like, nah, fuck this. This is what I've gone through. This is who I am. This is how I'm feeling today. Today I'm freaking out and I'm going to tell everyone. And it's okay, guys. I feel good now. So you cannot calm down. I love that. Your page is a representation of real life. And then also you being a freaking boss ass lady in the gym, lifting all these crazy heavy weights. And then you're going out smashing a photo shoot, looking like the sexiest person in the world. And then you're still you can just do everything. And I love that you're showing everyone that you can do it all. You don't have to be put into a certain folder.
Yeah, I think the most important thing with that is when I first came into the social media space, and it's been around for a very long time, and things are so different now to what they used to be. But when I first came into Instagram and social media was just such a big thing, and it was all very new, and influencers were all very new. The only thing you would see 100% of the time was perfection. It was editing, it was posed, it was traditionally everything to do with highlights. And I honestly think one of the most important journeys for anyone who is on social media and they do have a goal with social media is acknowledging your part to play in that too. I'm really, really proud of who I am now, but in order to get here, my God, did I make a lot of mistakes. I did. And that includes social media as well, where I fell into that trap pretty hard. I could definitely see trends in my social media where I'd kind of dip my toe in a difficult topic where I might talk about eating disorders or mental health issues or diagnosis or what I actually did for a living at the time, which was all very hush-hush. And then you could see I would kind of see how I went with it, check the reaction, and I was very heavily influenced by how people reacted to my content or my opinion. And even though I had the right intentions, I realize now that my reaction to them stopped me from my original goal, which was being open and transparent and giving people the ability to relate to the hardest times in their life, not the highlight reels, not just the photo shoots, but the times when you are really vulnerable, which makes all of the other achievements in life so much more special because there was that hardship. And there's a big difference with what my social media used to look like to what it is now.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And we spoke about before, it kind of gives people permission to say oh, well, if she's so strong and amazing and she's also having bad days and she's also been through hard shit, that means that I can also get through this stuff. And it's also okay for me to talk about it because we all know you're not going to, our feelings is not going to go away. You have to be actually feeling it. And you have to allow yourself to be sad and to grieve and to go through all the emotions. And I think that a lot of social media and just media in general kind of just shows, like you said, just the highlight reels of everyone. And when you're just looking at that constantly, it's very easy to get stuck in that mindset that I have to be happy all the time and I have to have good days 100%. All the time. when that's
100%.
so far from the truth.
Yeah. And when you look into the psychology of social media, it's all about connection. But the truth was, it was never a genuine connection. But the more authentic that you can bring yourself online, the more genuine connections you can get from people. Like especially in the last few recent years when I was really, really transparent about my actual life, oh my God, have I just met the most incredible people. And it's really refreshing as well when they're not people so much in the Instagrammer influential persona. They are just normal, incredible, inspiring people. And I get that a lot from my clients as well, because they usually gravitate towards me because I'm open, and then I get to know them and their story. And everyone has permission to put online if they want, but it's 100% not everybody's thing. But I get this really unique opportunity in both of my careers to meet these absolute hidden gems in the world. And it's almost like you're kind of doing it for them so that you know you can help all the other people see sides of everyone else that they're going to keep hidden, but they have no idea how inspiring they are. And I'm just very, very lucky.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. So I wanted to talk about your background in fitness and stuff like that. But before we get into that, so obviously you're a PT. Is that right?
Yep.
Online coach?
Online coach now. So I started off being a personal trainer in Newcastle with actual physical clients in the gym. And then I moved away from personal training. I was actually supposed to go overseas and be a personal trainer overseas.
Oh, no way.
Oh, it was an absolute disaster. That happened. Long story short, I was always really, really interested in the fitness industry. I had a really strong personal connection with it. But I actually didn't start going into the gym or being really health aware or interested. Although I wouldn't say at the start of my journey I was health aware. I was weight aware. And I thought that meant that I was looking after myself. And I have an obsessive personality type where if I do get interested in something, I immerse myself and everything to do with it. But then along the lines, I kind of noticed that I built some really toxic behaviors around that. Which some were really positive, and it taught me a lot about myself and about life. But then the other ones that developed were extremely negative and kind of fed into that eating disorder behavior that we were talking about before. So I started with my own journey, and I lost a significant amount of weight. And I was terrified of the gym. I used to work in jails, and my whole career aside from personal training was to do with crime and criminology. And I've been a parole officer most of my life.
Wow, there you go. Yeah. Never would have guessed that.
Yeah, so no one ever knew that back when I first started, because obviously working in government, you have to keep it really separate, because you don't want to have one of your parolees run into your social media and there's like 20 million photos of my bum. Like, so at the time you have to wait a few years until you can really tell people. So it kind of felt like I was living this double life, but behind the scenes I was finishing night shift and going to an Anytime Fitness and Cessnock and using my 24-hour gym key, and at 2 a.m. in the morning I was using YouTube videos looking up how do I use this machine, and like not being able to like lift up a barbell so that I can just rack it, and then just like walking away from it because it was too hard. And that's how I actually started in the gym. And then one thing led to another, and I had a really big body transformation, and I posted it on social media for the first time, and it just absolutely blew up, and everyone was congratulating me, and everyone thought I was doing so well, and I did it by myself, and I was really proud of myself. But behind the scenes, I was fatigued in the gym. I was starting to pass out. I was not going out to functions because I couldn't eat the same thing I was eating every day, that got me to this amazing, aesthetically pleasing place that everyone was rewarding me for. And I slowly cascaded back into I'd always had an eating disorder issues when I was younger that were quite severe. But they almost seemed to have like a peak point and then a low point through my life. And it hadn't really been a major issue until it was triggered from starting to lose weight or trying to lose weight. And then the obsessive part of my personality kind of took over and took it to an absolute extreme, which a lot of people don't really realize. And I've done a lot of therapy myself in this space, but also working in parole, my specialty was mental health diagnosis and dual diagnosis with substance abuse. And we work with a lot of eating disorders and a lot of mental health disorders and illnesses and all different spectrums of vulnerability of the mind. And eating disorders are not always fueled by perceiving your aesthetic to be a certain way. Eating disorders can very much be transitioned into self-harming behaviors. So with me, when I was younger, I had a really, really turbulent childhood. And that childhood came with a lot of mental health complexities and issues that I developed growing up as different coping mechanisms. And it wasn't until I got older and did a lot of work on myself that we realized my eating disorder was not a traditional eating disorder. It came from a place of self-harm. It was the adult version of me ensuring that I could put myself in this chaotic crisis, toxic cycle because it's all I'd ever known, which I found very, very interesting. And it was probably the key to me understanding that helped me really rise above a lot of the behaviors that controlled me most of my life.
Yeah, that is really interesting because I think that a big misconception around binge or not just eating disorders in general is that it's always related to how you look.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to talk to someone who has like that was not really the reason. Or you might have started as a diet, but then obviously it was covering up other emotions as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it is that you've been through when you were younger? And what
So I'm really open and transparent about this now, but that only happened probably quite recently, actually. In the last year, I decided to come out and be really open about topics of child sexual abuse. And I think it's important, anyone that might be listening to this podcast, that they do have a history in that, and maybe they don't want to delve down into that room today to maybe not listen to this right now. But in the spirit of being open and transparent, I just had this, I've always lived something that kind of felt like a double life. And on a much smaller scale, that's how I felt when I kind of had to hide my career from people, because it's something I very much loved, but I couldn't really openly talk about. And my God, did it give me some amazing experiences. But then even on a deeper level, I always had this perception of trying to be a mental health advocate. And people didn't really understand where that came from or why I was so driven to do that. And it was because most of my life I had this white picket fence persona with my family. And depending on how old you are or when you grew up, the trend of the time is almost the way that social media was developed as well. And this happened before social media, that you show everyone you're okay. You only show everyone the perfect side of your life. And that was very much what my childhood was kind of like. But what really happened behind the scenes was my father was a twice convicted child sex offender. He was a perpetrator of somebody else in the family, which I won't speak to because that's their story. And he was released back into the family home after time in jail. And, you know, I grew up with him and had this kind of difficult, complicated childhood with a really interesting relationship with my dad, which I didn't really realize until I got older that it wasn't a normal relationship with my dad. And it wasn't until I started getting about 13 or 14, I started really rebelling back, and mental health issues really became quite prevalent, where I started realizing that certain things weren't normal, and I was around other people who had normal relationships with their parents, and we were just in a really chaotic like a family home that I still really find difficult to kind of wrap my head around. So I don't go into detail too much because I just don't know how to explain how twisted it was, because I genuinely at the time thought it was a normal household. Like we had these weird things where we had half the community find out at some point and then like call my father a pedo, and I didn't really understand what that meant, or I would be removed from the family home from other parents or certain behaviors and things that never really made sense. And my issues with food or not eating, or to be really graphic, harming myself, happened from a very, very young age. And I genuinely remember when I went to school and I had hurt myself or cut myself. And I just remember the whole school thinking I was doing it for attention, which ironically I was, and I needed the help, but it was a negative thing. It was like, oh, you're just doing this for attention. But as an adult now, if I see a child doing anything for attention, I don't care. That like, they need help. Like,
yeah,
I never really understood why that was such a bullying topic at the time for people doing things for attention, because I never really understood, okay, well, what's behind that behavior? And as an adult, I still struggle to understand it now. But I was removed from the family home when I was in between 13 and 16. We had this really strange custody battle where I didn't want to go back into the family home. And I had a couple of really great childhood friends who tried to keep me in a safe family home. But government systems at the time, people don't realize if you actually leave conditioned housings or foster housings, the police have the right to go to wherever you are, even if it's a safe place, and take you back there, even if that place is not a safe place.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And this is all Australia too. Like, this is not a lot of the time when you hear these stories, people don't think it happens in our own backyard, but my God, the stories and the people that I've met and the people that I work with, even people's stories who are significantly worse than mine, are all your neighbors, people that you go to the gym with, people who might serve you coffee, like just your doctor, and they're everywhere. And you could make Netflix stories out of every single one of them. Like, so then I got legally declared independent by the time I was 16. And even to this day, I have people messaging me from school after I came out about my dad. And they were like, I had absolutely no idea. Like, I'm so sorry. And admittedly, like, I wasn't liked very much in school. I was always a really strong personality, but I was always very chaotic. And I don't really blame anyone for not understanding why, because I was very much in my own adulthood. I know best. I was always really stubborn. But in my defense, it was a way to survive things happening at the time. So I was paying rent, working at McDonald's, going back to my own little unit, like trying to cook dinner and stuff. Like, I was a mini adult by the time I was in year 10. And I separated from my parents emotionally in a relationship, and I just tried to live my life. And you think that you're going to do okay, and you have these periods where you really try. And I don't know anyone who comes from a background of trauma where you don't see this wavering pattern in their life, where you can see them kind of get the confidence in themselves and build their self-esteem. And they're like, no, I could do this. And they go for whatever it is that might be their goals in life. And then they start going really well and they hit it. And then something happens that just doesn't quite feel right, or maybe something triggers them and they shoot back down into all of these negative, repressed, unresolved emotions from their childhood. And even with what I do now for a living, that's what we really try and focus on, because there's, we talk about breaking that trauma cycle. That's what we're working with. A lot of the unconscious things that affect people that they're not even really aware of yet until they start digging into it. So it's a super long story, but I'll try and keep it really condensed. Then had a big life, kind of moved on with my life, had a really big history with being aware of my mental health. And from the time I started realizing I had some major issues, with just really toxic thought processes and really invasive thoughts and eating disorders, I went and got help. I got as much help that was available to me as many times as I could. I didn't really have many people around me, but I have 3 solid friends who were like family that just stuck with me through absolute thick and thin, and the worst moments in my life, and still loved me for it anyways. And they're still around today, and they're very, very proud of kind of watching it from start to finish, where we talk about it sometimes and they're just kind of like, I just can't believe that you're okay. Like, we genuinely didn't think that that would happen. But then I chose to go public about my experience as a child this year because disconnected from my family, and just before I went to be overseas to start the new life as a personal trainer, I had the federal police force turn up at my doorstep. And also a mother in hysterics because there's just 10 different federal police cars raiding our family home. And I definitely don't talk to my mother. So it was a very strange thing to get a call from her. And then my father's been reconvicted. So he was part of that on the news pre-COVID. There was this big European and US joint task force for child sex offenders that were working with like the dark web and exposing child sex offenders from the web and then linking that to their actual lives and getting a lot of convictions in place. So he was one of those like 20 offenders in Australia that they connected with that. And they'd been investigating him for quite some time, and they finally had enough evidence to convict him again. And I'd already gone through this really big journey myself, and had a really difficult time making sure that I was okay and getting through that. And then it almost felt like so I'm 27 now, turning 28. And at the time I would have been 26. And I had this solid 5 years of recovery, trying to get myself sorted and also just trying to be here and be okay. And then this hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm like, you guys have taken so much from me. Like, when is this gonna end? Like, so then he was put on bail and lived in the family home, and then I had this really complicated relationship and court battle with my family for such a long time. And I think, ironically, the hard part about it was not the fact itself. It wasn't the investigation. It wasn't reflecting back on my childhood. It was actually the fact that I had this massive secret. Like, I couldn't tell anyone because I didn't even know how to tell anybody, and I couldn't talk about it. And, I would literally just be going to work having 20 million racing thoughts in my mind. And I was like, how could anyone possibly understand what's going on right now? And also, I'm very conscious that I have this problem that when I was younger, I'm very conscious that I'll seem like an attention seeker. But the truth is, that was just the truth. It had nothing to do with me exacerbating anything. It literally was just the reality of my life. And I had this overwhelming guilt about something that was not my fault. And it ate away at me for so long, so long. And I got stuck in COVID overseas, which is a totally different story, but the overseas thing didn't work out because COVID happened and I got stuck overseas, but I flew into Queensland and I live here now. And then the criminal proceedings continued when I was in Queensland as well. So it's completely isolated. I had none of my friends. I didn't know anybody here. I also had this crazy criminal investigation going on, and with social media, I was very much just this fitness girl, and I was just the fit girl that people wanted to watch and see how she was transforming or what she was doing, or even at certain times, fake accounts made and things of people who were like, oh, you're just like a complete mess. You try and talk about suicide, you should just do it. Like, really intense responses from social media from people who just didn't know any better, and they pegged me completely wrong. as a person, I had like a whole imposter syndrome thing going on. I was like, I'm like living 20 million different lives and they're all completely separate, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting pretending to be okay all the time. It's exhausting to pretend that I have like my shit together, or that I actually wanted to go to the gym today, because today I had to sit in front of police officers and give interviews about my dad and my mother, who I thought loved me. And the last thing I want to do right now is lift weights. But at the same time, too, when I finished lifting weights, it's like a lot of that aggression was released. And that could actually really help somebody hearing that. And how do you explain that without telling them the truth? So I thought about it for a really long time, where I was like, I wanted to wait for the right time, because obviously in the middle of a criminal proceeding, you need to be really careful what you put online. It could actually hinder the investigation. And even at one point, I remember my father's criminal solicitor actually tried to use my social media as a defense.
What? What?
Yeah.
Jesus
oh my God,
Christ.
it was so bad. Especially because I used to work in the criminal justice system, and I'm really proud that I'm confident enough to dish it back as much as I got it. Because I was like working with the DPP and the director of public prosecutors, and she's like called me and she's like, Maddie, I'm gonna tell you something, but I'm gonna ask you to try and be calm about it. I'm like, here we go. And she's like, so the defense lawyer made a submission. So another part of the story is maybe TMI, but along with like child abuse investigations, as an adult at my sister's wedding, he also set up hidden cameras, and took in the shower and took videos. I know, and took videos. I'm laughing about it, but I'm laughing about it because it's just really horrible to like say. Like, so there was adult convictions as well, which is why they could try and use my social media, and they tried to say that the criminal lawyer was trying to say that I was using it for social media content, and I was like,
oh my God,
sure. I'm just getting my dad to sneak up a camera, and that's what I post. Like, I just had this really horrible connection with what I was going through at the time with social media and these perceptions of me, and like, just it was such a crazy time in my life. And all while this was happening, still nobody knew. And it was just eating away at me. Like, how do it felt really overwhelming, like very, very overwhelming. And I really shied away from social media because I wasn't being my genuine self. Like, I'm sitting here talking about people, how to be motivated, how to get through it. And it's the last thing I wanted to be. Like, it really was. I just wanted to crumble and sit in a corner and eat ice cream. And that was probably the biggest time where I wanted to relapse my eating disorder. Like, I worked really hard to be okay, but food is an emotional comfort for me. It's something that kind of just it's not a fix to emotional triggers, but at least it's some kind of release at the time. And with my diagnosis with eating disorders, I was bulimic. So my binge, purge, restrict cycle was my form of self-harming. And that's all I wanted to do to myself. Just some little release of adrenaline, which is pretty much what some self-harming is, depending on the individual purpose and the thing behind it. But that's what my eating disorder was for me. It was a means to hurt myself repetitively. And I really, really wanted to go back into that. Like, as much as I denied it at the time, because that's what got me through, it's the only thing I'd ever known that kind of might have helped with the release. So I worked with a psychologist, and oh my God, did I hit the gym hard at that period of time. It was the only thing where I felt like I could put my headphones in and just be the powerful woman that I wanted to be. Like, because outside of the gym, I was crumbling. I felt like I was the ultimate victim. There was all these complexities of the court case. I felt like I had no power in the criminal justice system. I just had to go by what everyone else was doing. I had really complicated, I like relationship with my family. So during this point in time, I hadn't heard from my mother at all. She was like living in the house with him whilst he was on bail, supporting him, looking after him, and I was just completely isolated. And even though there was all this evidence and the investigation was going through, he was convicted, still hadn't heard from her, like to see if I was okay or what was going on, and just all of this aggression and all this hate. But then when I walked into the gym, I get emotional about it, but like it's the only place where I can kind of go, I am powerful. I am here. I am doing this despite of everything else. And as a woman, a lot of men won't understand what that feels like. And especially like when you start at the gym, you can barely pick up, like I could barely pick up a kilo of weight. I couldn't squat anything, couldn't deadlift anything, but I was still there and I was still doing it. I was still walking past the guys with my tiny little weights and my head held high. And then now that I can actually lift and that I
lift more
feel
than the
really
guys.
strong. I do. I really do. It's that one place where I'm just kind of like, you are powerful. And that's what competing does for me now as well. It's like, you are powerful. You are in control. You actually can do what you put your mind to. And so when I competed this year, that's what that meant to me. That like it wasn't about placing, it wasn't about the bikinis or the tans. Like they're all great things that come with it, but it was feeling powerful and having the ability to control your mindset and your goal regardless of how you're feeling at the time. And I just, yeah, it meant a lot to me. So once the court case and the conviction happened, sentencing was the last thing that happens in a criminal conviction. And I had this really powerful moment where I got to write a victim impact statement. And for anyone who has written a victim impact statement, it is really difficult to write because you don't write your story. And also I've been on both sides of the coin where being a parole officer, we used to do pre-sentencing reports and things like that. And we worked very heavily with our offenders and the sentencing procedures and give recommendations for what it was like. But people don't realizing that a victim impact statement in a criminal proceeding is actually weighted heavier than they think. A victim, and hopefully things are changing in that space, and I really intend on trying to change that space. But with a victim impact statement, Australia has sentencing grades. So if you get convicted with one crime under the criminal code, you can get anywhere between 15 to 25 years for manslaughter. But what's the difference between 25 years and 15? Like that 10 years is a big gap. So there's all these variables in criminal proceedings that can actually push the scale up higher. And that can also come down to the level of violence towards the offense, the nature of the relationship with the victim, the impact on the victim. So the victim impact statement, when you present it, is really important. And when I do get to work with victims, my instructions to them is it's also a very therapeutic and powerful moment. You get to say your piece, and you also have the opportunity to say it in front of the offender if you want to. You don't have to, but you also get to say it in front of anyone else who might be watching that. So it was a really big deal. And particularly because what convictions in Australia don't tell you is the nature of the relationship. There's no difference between a sexual offense charge on paper when it comes to being a family member or a non-family member, which makes the victimization of the crime really different when you think about what a father is supposed to provide and what parents are supposed to provide and represent to a child, which is what my statement when I wrote that, that's honestly what it was all about. What it was like growing up with someone like that as your father, and what it means to not have one.
Yeah, have
And
that in your home, the place where you're meant to feel the most safe.
yeah, and I went down when I was younger, like I feel like a lot of women can relate to what I'm about to say. By God, did I choose some terrible partners? And there's a very obvious reason for that.
Done that as well. Yeah.
Oh, it's just, and you think back to it once you get in a place where you're kind of free from it and you get to reflect on everything. It just makes so much sense. So much sense. And so I was building up to this big moment, and I finally got the opportunity, and the day was coming, but I woke up that morning and I had a missed call from a family member who I hadn't heard from in a long time. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I've worked in really, really difficult settings my whole life. I'm I'm really used to complex things or complex crisis. And as soon as I saw the missed call, like I woke up my partner at the time, and I was like, he's gone. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, he's committed suicide. Oh, that's my cat. Can you? Um, yeah, I was like, he's committed suicide. And he's like, how do you know that? I was like, I can feel it. There's something you just know. And then I called them, and surely enough, before sentencing, he had committed suicide.
Wow.
At the church where me and my sibling was born, and left a beautiful suicide video. Still didn't hear from my mother. And I think after all that went down, I processed it. I took some time, and we had to go through the really weird situation of what to do with like the funeral. And the funeral was probably the hardest, actually. It wasn't the suicide itself, it was the funeral. Because
Why?
This will also be something that any victim can probably relate to when it comes to like a family member who's victimized you. It's saying goodbye to a father, or what should have been your father. It's saying goodbye to the opportunity of having a good relationship with a father. And it's also saying goodbye to an abuser. And with me and my perspective of mental health and suicide, I'm always a two sides of the coin kind of girl. So as a daughter, I'll never understand. And as a daughter, I'm not okay with the whole situation. But as an advocate and someone who really wants to change a lot of this space, it's almost it's a positive thing in the sense that he's free. Not as in he deserved to die from punishment, but I've had a really twisted perspective in my life where I've had the opportunity to actually work with child sex offenders on reducing recidivism, which is reducing their ability to reoffend. And I think one of the best and worst parts of myself is that I can balance my perspective, where I genuinely think he was tormented in a lot of ways. And I have worked with very, 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 very few child sex offenders who weren't abused as a child themselves, which gives them absolutely no excuse, zero excuse.
No.
But they are tormented. And that confliction to me would be impossible to live with. And I almost felt happy that he didn't have to feel that way anymore. It's really, really difficult to explain. And then I guess if you apply that to a lot of broader issues, when you talk about difficult topics like suicide with other people, it's such a difficult thing to process emotionally. But I guess something that does help me process is that that person was in pain. And even though my father's situation is very different, he did it at a place of guilt and fear from going back into custody. But there's just so many complexities with it. Like, it's such a hard thing to explain, let alone understand. But when the time was right, I decided to be more open about the truth of everything. And I didn't look back. The moment that I did it, like literally the same day that I did it, I'm like, so when I get really anxious, my chest goes red, like a big anxiety response. I was shaking. I like felt like I couldn't breathe. I was like, oh my God, where are my anti-anxiety meds? And the response. So I understand why people don't publicly support topics like that. I totally get it. I really, really do. But the amount of messages that I got of people, which is really humbling, of people with almost parallel stories, almost parallel.
Yeah.
And they're literally going, you have changed my life. Like I thought that you were just some fitness chick who, you know, posted her workouts and what she ate for a day, and the likeness of what you have been doing and how much your story is like mine is everything to me. Like so many of them, and so many of them will listen to this too, with stories worse than mine, all in our own backyard. And some of them are raising families, they're managing businesses, they are phenomenal, incredible people. And you kind of realize so many different issues where, one, this happens way too much, way too much. And it happens because it's behind closed doors. It's not spoken about enough. People don't have the opportunity to feel comfortable speaking about it, and it only empowers the perpetrator. So the main issue that I got from that is, oh my God, this is way too many people. Way too many people. But then the second thing that was the more positive thing out of it was, they're not alone. You're not alone. I'm not alone. And there's so many examples of people who've been through things like myself, even worse or different, and have the ability to be good people, to be functioning, to go from their goals, to figure it out, to make something of that. And I just didn't look back, and something in me just changed, where I felt like I didn't have to pretend anymore. And it was the biggest relief of my whole life.
Even you just saying that, I can see the relief coming out of you. Like, you just look like you've just taken a massive load off your chest, and it's so nice to see. Have you forgiven him?
Ooh. I would like to say, with most things, that one day maybe I could forgive him. But the more I kind of look into what I want from my life and what I want to do for other people, is that I don't have to forgive him to be okay. I don't have to. And this kind of, I mean, this is definitely subject to the individual, because it's up to how you process things. Because sometimes forgiveness is so empowering for other people that it's definitely worth it. But for me personally, I don't have to forgive the people that hurt me in order to be okay. My strength is that I understand. I do. I understand the levels behind why he did what he did, how he offended, how much that would have hurt. Even sometimes I can even sympathize with what his life might have been like, because there were genuinely times you could tell that he tried to be different, and he tried to be happy, and he tried to be loving, and it was almost like just this part of himself he couldn't bury away. And when he did bury away, it was like this big toxic infection that came out in a brutal way. And I don't I don't have to forgive him to be okay, but I understand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. It just, I can't even grasp what you've been through. Like it just, yeah, oh, I don't even know what to say. Thank you so much for sharing that. I can understand that would have been so difficult. And if anything, I just think that you're even more amazing and more strong and brave, most of all brave, for sharing this story, because it is a scary world out there. And unfortunately, there are a lot of trolls who will literally jump at any opportunity to be nasty towards you. No matter if you're the most selfless, amazing person in the world, they're still going to find something that they don't like and that triggers them, and they're going to go after you. And I just think it's so brave, and that we need so many more people like you out there that share those stories and share what they've been through, and that it's okay to not be okay. And that it's okay also that you haven't forgiven him, and that you still, what goes through your mind when you think about him now?
There's a huge sense of relief on two parts. There's a huge sense of relief that he's not around. Like that sounds very, I mean, it sounds selfish if it was normal suicide, but at the same time too, for me personally, I also don't have to worry about him. I don't have to worry about when he gets out of jail. I don't have to worry about, because there was this huge part during the criminal process where I was kind of like, oh my God, is he okay? Like in my really traumatized mind, but I love what I do, and I probably my biggest passion is helping really vulnerable people. And even though he's a bad person who hurts people, and in my really victimized, twisted relationship with my father, I was like, oh my God, like the first time he went into custody, he was literally bashed by multiple offenders with a brick and airlifted. Like child sex offenders are not taken kindly in custody in Australia. So like one of the motivators to commit suicide for him would not have just been out of guilt, it would have been out of fear of what was waiting for him if he went into custody. And he wasn't going into custody for a short time. So of course it was going to happen before sentencing. But I also had this really horribly twisted experience with him where when he was released to bail back into the family home, it was actually before I flew out to London, and I actually spoke with him, and I asked him why, and I was like, you know, what the F is wrong with you? Like you've been through this before, you've been convicted for this before, you've gone down this road, you knew what was waiting for you, and you still did it anyways. And he was just a crumbling, crying mess, and he's like, I know, like I fucked up, like it was really twisted. And then the only reason I knew that he would have committed suicide before sentencing is before I flew out, he actually did try and commit suicide, and I was the one who stopped him, which is super twisted. Super twisted.
Wow.
Because in my mind, I wanted him to face the consequences, and there's always this altruistic part of me that's like, he can be a better person, because it's not like he's not like a normal person that anyone else is dealing with. Because if I was an officer or like a caseworker, I could remove myself from this, but as a daughter, I was like, that's my dad, and I really do believe he can be better. Like he can be better. So I just had this really twisted altruistic perspective that I could help.
I feel like that shows in what you're doing now as well. Like you're a helper. You're someone who wants to help people. And like, do you feel like your choice of profession now is because of what you've gone through as a child or growing up?
Absolutely. I always wrestled with the two sides of myself, where it was fitness or crime. And the reality was, the overarching thing was people. It's helping people get to a place in life that they want to be. And it doesn't matter which hat I'm putting on for the day. I absolutely love it. And especially like I've been watching the Women's Fitness Academy for a while as well. There is a big difference between men and women in this space, and there's nothing less or more about it. It's just different. And women being empowered is just everything that I want to do in the fitness industry. I don't get me wrong, I absolutely love working with some of my male clients. I do. They're amazing and they're little champions. But that empowerment to do something that they feel like they can't do and kind of dominating this industry gets me so excited.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
Some of the girls like yourself who are just coming into this industry and just absolutely trying to make it a safe, comfortable, empowering place for everybody is what actually makes me excited. And that's 100%. The overarching thing of everybody. It's helping people get to a place that they never thought they could be. And not through holding their hand, not through pushing them, through making them realize that they have everything that they need and more.
Yeah, leading the way. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think there's like, people always talk about how bad social media is, and there's so many like negative people on there, and there is definitely, but I also feel like it's such a good place for females to feel empowered and to go and like chat. You can chat to someone on the other side of the world, and you can help them to have their bad day, or you can read one of their posts to be like, fuck, I feel amazing now. Like that's what I want to aspire to be like. So social media is definitely not all bad. I know that you work in an office, is that right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to, sometimes you post your stories, like your outfits of the day and stuff, and like obviously you look amazing in anything. Like you could put on a green garbage bag and you still look banging. But I just like, what's it like working in an office space when you are someone who like obviously has a lot of curves because you do train a lot, and you're wearing like, you're not just going in wearing like really loose fitting clothes, like you're going in and you're wearing like tight clothes, they're showing off your body, which I love. But like, what is it like in an office environment like that?
I actually have this really I'm trying to use the term that I'm a bodybuilder now, because it's something that I'm doing to kind of empower myself.
What did you call it? Sorry, it just cut off for a second.
I'm calling myself a bodybuilder now, which sounds really strange. It's something that I'm trying to practice to kind of empower myself to remember that you can be that. That is you. You can call yourself that. Like you build bodies. And going into work as a bodybuilder, I noticed I used to wear. So I wear a lot of suits because professionally wise, it's just the flavor of the month. It's you work in corporate, we go to court a lot, we work with a lot of sophisticated and non-sophisticated clients. So it's the space to wear a lot of suits. But every now and then I have like these short sleeve cut tops, and I turn it, especially when I'm competing and I'm very lean and quite vascular in my arms. I'll turn up to work in this like little t-shirt type thing that matches my suit, and I'll take my suit jacket off, and then I remember my colleagues, they'll be talking to me, they'll be not making eye contact with me, and they're genuinely just looking at my bicep. I'm like, guys, like the feminism in the workplace has changed. It used to be breasts, now it's biceps. Like, it's like, come on, eyes are up here. Like,
oh my God, I love that. That's literally my goal. Like, I want biceps today. When I have biceps days, I'll be like, fuck yeah, I made it.
It's so funny when they and I like, it took me a while to kind of be the same thing as everything. It took me a little bit of time to feel comfortable with accepting that there were many different sides of myself. Because obviously in a work profession, I didn't want people to think that like I am the girl with hair extensions. I do the posing and flick my hair. I wear the fake tan. I absolutely rock a matching gym fit to the gym because it makes me feel good. And I go after work, so I'm absolutely wearing makeup. But at the same time, too, I work harder than most of the men in the gym, and I know that. But me wearing a matching outfit and looking a particular way changes absolutely nothing about who I am.
God, no. Just say
And
you have a good sense of fashion.
exactly. So it happens in the reverse as well. So it also happens when you're at work and you're trying to, penetrate this professional industry, and quite a difficult industry that I work in as well. Because ironically, I do work in law, but I work in child sexual abuse. And there's a high level of professionalism there, to be met. But also acknowledging that I am the girl who's going to talk about the gym a lot. I do weigh my milk when I have coffee. And the more I kind of introduce that other part of me into my workplace, I realized all the insecurities that I had about trying to go for a competing goal, or also being a coach and also being the girl that wears matching gym fits, was mostly in my head. There are the odd cookies that do absolutely judge, but for the most part, every single one of my colleagues when I competed watched that stream live, and they were all and they were all texting me going, yes, like, but also like even the girls that work with me, they were like, Maddie, are you supposed to be that big? I'm like, oh, I'm in the wrong category. I'm like, what? Good pick up. They're like, oh no,
that's
it's
amazing.
really beautiful.
And I love that, because people are always so worried about what other people are gonna think, and like, can I wear this? Like, what are people gonna say? And I love that, like you literally proof that no one gives a shit. Wear something that you feel sexy and confident in, and don't worry about what anyone else is thinking about it.
You just got to take the leap. Like if that's part of you, if you're a working professional and you're super busy, but you also have this gym life that you love as well, or like for other people, they might be really creative. They might have, I don't know, like a medieval dress up on the weekend part of their life that they adore as well. Like it doesn't matter what you apply it to. You just have to be your authentic self to people, and the right people will gravitate around you, and the wrong people, they'll make it known, and you can just avoid them. Like,
yes, preach. I love that so much. And I also feel like the more you can be yourself and put your actual true self out there, the more the opportunities that just kind of come towards you. And you, like you said, the right people are gonna gravitate towards you, because you are showing the real version of you.
Yeah, it's so freeing. But it's not perfect. I have so much development to do as well. But it's a good place to be.
Yeah, and it's such a good reminder as well, because I think that it's so easy to get lost in like, who am I, and like that person's looking like that, and maybe I should also look in like that, or think like that, or act like that. And it is really easy to get lost in yourself. And even I struggle with it at times. Like, oh shit, like, no, like, come on, back to what your actual true values are.
I know. I still struggle with it now. Like, I think I struggle with it now, but only recently. It's because as a first-time competitor, I've come into a competing space, and I'm hitting a different level of my exposure into the fitness industry. And that's really, I've kept some very clear boundaries with my competing, and obviously having an eating disorder history.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that.
The part of knowing who you are, and also when you compete, feeling like not even with your body, but your face. Like I didn't realize how hyper focused I would become on, am I beautiful enough? Like I got my stage video back the other day, and I could not stop staring at my nose. And I realized it's because a lot of people on my social media are getting nose jobs at the moment. And
yeah, I've seen that, like the new trend.
Right. I'm wrestling with myself about, is it my job to feel comfortable, beautiful, and powerful and confident in myself as I look in my face? Or is getting a nose job something I should be considering? And it's balancing as a woman in this industry, acknowledging that those thoughts are there, but also working through them to know that they actually could mean something a little bit deeper. So when I say that I've got different levels of my journey, like that's something that I was working through quite recently, trying to balance that mindset where I'm like, this is not right. Like
Yeah, totally.
pulling yourself back.
Yeah, I agree. And with plastic surgery being so freaking easy to get now, like sometimes, like that's something that I struggle with as well. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I should like do this change to my face or my body. But then you, like you said, you have to go back and like, hang on, do I actually like that? Or is that something that I've wanted for a long period of time? Or is this just because I saw like a few people on social media that had it done, and now I think that I need it as well, but to look as beautiful as them. And it is super difficult to navigate that kind of like all those voices, and especially when we're constantly getting it from everywhere. But it is just about being true to yourself.
It's a woman's bread and butter since I can remember. Like honestly, how many life trends did we go through when we were younger about having a box gap, being skinny, hip dips? Like they're all still around now, but oh my God. Like,
it's going up and down like this all the time. I guess it's just so, like, when I was growing up, there was only magazines. There wasn't any, like, Instagram wasn't a thing. So I could you can kind of choose what you want to read a bit more. Like, yes, you would see it like in the newsstands, but now you open up your Instagram and you can get some random sponsored post from some random influencer that you don't even follow, that it's all about all these like perfect things about them. So I think it's a bit harder now, definitely. But I wanted to ask about, because I know, like, obviously you said that you had an eating disorder before and that you worked through that, but with competing, that it is like, it has to be strict, otherwise you're not going to get as lean as you need to be when you're on stage. Like, did you feel like you got those kind of thoughts back in your head when you were doing it?
I think that was the biggest reason, that the times that I had tried to compete in the past was probably the last time I tried to compete was about 4 years ago, and I was very much in the middle of an eating disorder, and I used it to mask a restrictive behavior. And I didn't actually have anyone helping me, and I was just doing this on my own. I completely lost my shit. Like, I was not okay by any means.
At least you know it.
My behavior was out of this world, and it, like, even just on social media, like I would be talking about the word fat. Like, I genuinely thought I was fat. And now that I look back, I think about the people who would have been around me listening to that, and I'm just filled with guilt, because I'm like, oh, you idiot. Like, I wish that I knew back then how much of an impact I would have had on people around me, because that's a big important thing too. And I was very conscious coming back into competing and coming back into the fitness industry, that you have to be so conscious with your language with bodybuilding. And particularly when you're a coach and you have lifestyle clients, if you constantly have that, and people normalize it as a competitive edge. They're like, oh, I need to be better. I need to be this. I need to be leaner. Like, I'm not where I should be. But when you're a coach dueling in that space, if you're not conscious of how you approach that in your life and your lifestyle, and your language that you use and the perspectives that you have, it can be such a toxic sport, so toxic, and it's such a difficult balance to hit. So I think the biggest thing for me is, one, I did therapy for a lot of years, and I was actually talking to my psychologist, and so after my father's suicide, I'm one of those people that always has a goal. Normally, I would be at university full time, and I'm an honours and a scholarship student, so I have to get high distinctions constantly, and I am not academically gifted. When I do uni, I struggle to retain information. It does not come naturally to me, so I have to work really, really, really hard. I have to get tutors. I have to put a large amount of time to study, because I can become easily distracted, overwhelmed, anxious. So I have to channel a lot of energy into that to do well. And it was also recent that I decided to defer, because I didn't know if, like with uni, you can't just randomly have a mental breakdown halfway through your exams or in the middle of the semester. One, it costs a lot of money, and two, it's a lot of time to invest if you're not going to follow it through and potentially end up failing. So I pulled back on that, and I was sitting with my psychologist because I was quite upset about that. It's something that I really wanted to achieve at a certain time, and I was doing really well, and then this thing happened that was out of my control. But out of having some self inventory, it wouldn't be the best idea for me to try and hit that right now. And then we started talking about some other goals and other things that I could do that might not be as mentally demanding right now while I was in this space. And I was like, one thing I always wanted to do was compete. I really tried to compete. I love posing. It is so much fun. I love doing anything that involves a large amount of adrenaline. And getting up on stage is, so I'm also a professional scuba diver. I've dived with multiple predatory sharks without cages. I've jumped out of planes. I've done all the bungee jumps. I've traveled in really dodgy places in the world by myself. Anything adrenaline,
Yeah,
I love it.
adrenaline junkie.
And I can tell you, I am. But competing is just, it's a different kind of adrenaline that you never thought. Like, just to stand there as a powerful Muslim woman in front of all of these people just staring at you and judging you and owning your shit, like, it is something else. And I was talking to her about that being a goal of mine, but then also at the same time too, I had to give that up and sacrifice it for the sake of recovery. I was like, those two worlds do not mix. Bodybuilding has such a high prevalent exposure to eating disorders for a very obvious reason. Heavy restrict, body dysmorphia, completely revolved around aesthetics. And also there's so many bad habits that coaches implement to their clients to get to a certain point, and they normalize it because it's that competitive edge. Like, that's just what you have to do if you want to be the best. Which is honestly, in my opinion, fucking bullshit. But it is the industry, and even though it's getting better, it's still out there a lot. And she said to me, isn't the point of recovery to be able to do the things that you want to do with the tools you have in place, live the life that you want to live safely? That's the real test of recovery, not to be completely avoidant on everything that you're scared of. But justifiably so for people who are listening to this with eating disorders. Competing is something you actually should be extremely cautious of. Just like I was, it's for a good reason, because it's a lot more volatile than going to a birthday and facing cake. It's an entire process over a period of time with a lot of months, and it's not just you involved either. It is, unfortunately, a whole bunch of other women that are around you who might not have the same approach to competing, and also having the boundaries and the self-inventory to not be too involved or triggered in other people's journey. I found that really, really hard myself, where I can do the best I can in the industry by trying to do it myself. And if I can do it myself, then hopefully I can just encourage that space without being too forceful. Because at the end of the day, everyone's an adult. They get to make their own decisions. And my opinion is not necessarily the right opinion, but it is something I'm passionate about. So when you do see people in the industry, like I saw this trend recently of people, not even recently, it's still going, what I eat in a day. And it was,
God, I hate those.
It's what I eat in a day, but it's competitive version, and they're not stipulating that. And it's what I eat in a day, and you would look at the food and it's 1,200 calories, and they're all 30-year-old women. And I'm like, what are you
full
doing?
of artificial
Like,
sweetness and all these diet foods.
Killing me. And it was promoted as so healthy, so motivating, so picture perfect. And I'm like, this is just not. But you can't. You can only encourage people. You can't push people into that space. And a lot of the time, people aren't going to share the same perspective as you. And you just need to be okay with that. But when you do end up in this world again, you have to. My boundary wasn't just with ensuring that I didn't go under a certain amount of calories for my health, and made sure that, like, when you talk about energy availability and programming for athletes, not going into that red zone where you fatigue yourself completely with programming, you lose your period. So my goal was to ensure that I didn't go under a certain amount of calories. for my particular body type and my muscle mass, because I have a large amount of lean muscle mass. I think my lean muscle mass is like 59 kilos.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's a cough, not bikini, not bikini Maddie.
Should have been an indicator.
The worst thing was everybody told me, and I was just
body
like,
dysmorphia again.
I was like, I'm a first timer. I'm gonna skip ICM and skip NABA and stuff, and just go straight to the big leagues. Cause I'm a first timer. I'm bikini. Like, no, it wasn't. But yeah, so I had calorie goals. I had energy expenditure goals. Because I also work. I'm a normal person. I work in an office. I'm not someone who is Instagram full time. I don't have that flexibility. I have to sit in front of a desk. I have to sit in front of a computer. I have to sit with clients. So if I couldn't do it in a way that maintained all of the work that I'd done for so many years, I wouldn't be doing it full stop. And the only way that I could actually maintain that, because I think a lot of time with recovery is being honest with yourself about yourself. You need to know you better than anybody. Like, you know how you like everyone has like that kind of friend who just calls you out on your shit straight away. You need to call you out on your own shit. You need to be that person for you. And before I went into competing, I know that I'm competitive. I can only be self-aware for so long before my competitive edge takes over, and I'm gonna want to push the boundaries. I'm gonna want to go hard. I love doing that. It's fun for me, which is exactly why I employed a coach. The only difference to me actually getting on stage this time and maintaining the boundaries that I had was having someone to hold me accountable. And we were really transparent before I started my prep process to go, okay, this is my history. This is my concerns. This is exactly what I'm like. And you are here to ensure that I do not go past that boundary full stop. And if you see any of X, Y, and Z signs, so an example of this is before I started competing, if I called her and started crying because I was fat, pull me out. Genuinely tell me that I can't be doing it. If I called her and said that I went into a binge, pull me out. If I cried and said that I purged, pull me out. Like, it is not worth my health to do something like that. Absolute full stop. And luckily for me, I wouldn't have done this if I didn't think I didn't have the capability to do this. So I did get the opportunity to jump on stage without having that be an issue. And to be honest, if I did have to pull out and I did relapse in some kind of way, I would have been honest with that about other people too. Because I think that's a part of leading the way is kind of having the courage to say, I want this, but this is more important. And also like influencing that on other people. That's okay. Your health should absolutely, irrevocably come first. No ifs, no buts. I just want to give everyone a PSA. The trophies are plastic. All right? The trophies are plastic. You pay a crap load of money. The trophies are plastic. Your health comes absolutely first, full stop. I know that you're competitive. Believe me, I love it just as much as anybody else. But the stage is always there. Always, always, always there. And there's always an opportunity to do it down the line in the future, if that's something that you really, really want. But if your health is diminished and you are not okay, be honest with yourself. Look after yourself. You deserve that. It's not worth it. And I'm sure you've done so many podcasts and you're exposed to so many women in this industry. I can't tell you, in my personal life alone, the amount of girls that I've talked to about competing who have stopped competing because they didn't do that, and the health issues that they have subsequent to pushing themselves too far are not worth it.
Oh God, so many. And I see so many people who use the road to the stage, myself included. I did one comp and I just used the whole road to the stage as a reason to like justify my eating disorder. Oh no, I'm prepping now. I have to eat this little. Before it was like you just ate that little because you didn't like want to eat, and now you had a reason to not do it. And I see so many girls do the same thing, and then they come out of it and they have done the show and they weren't ready to compete in the first place, and now they just go on to, most of the time they go on to binge eating, and that's what happened with me as well. And it's so sad.
It's so heartbreaking because people don't realize how much influence it has on your hormones. Your food is your lifeline. Your food, your nutrition, everything to do with your brains and your hormonal balance influences your moods and how you function. And even though you can't physically see what's going on in your brain, that heavy restrict cycle and the binge cycle as well is all reinforcing that. It's so powerful. And like even after comp, when people do, they use the term blow out a lot and binge eat. They've done studies that actually link that to being as chemically powerful psychologically as an addiction to drugs. And it's so undervalued because so many people will sit there and go, it's about self-control. It's just food. Yeah. It's not just food. Your brain has such a powerful influence with those nutrients. It's what it functions off. You wouldn't add fuel to a fire. It'd be like, oh, but it's just fuel. Fuel and fire. Like,
yeah. Oh, I 100% agree. And it would be so nice if there was at one point in time some way that you had to go through like a test that you were mentally ready to go on stage.
100%.
Maybe down the line.
I absolutely agree. And I also think very strongly an age limit. That a little bit controversial, and please don't come for me, but I don't think 18-year-old girls should be competing.
Oh God, absolutely not. They're only just adults.
No, and then when you look at physio, oh my God, yes. Oh my God. Lots of like girls who are just freshly 18 or girls who are now getting into that competing lifestyle at 16 and waiting to come of age. Please don't get me wrong, everyone's circumstance is subject to the individual, but from a health perspective, you can speak to nutritionists and doctors about a very similar thing. Developmentally, we do not stop until we're about 25, and even then we continue to change. But hormonally, we are still very volatile at the age of 18, and with competing being such a heavy restriction diet, and it is genuinely extreme dieting, that's what it's classified as, that has a major effect on your hormones. And whilst you're still in that developmental period, it could be even more adverse health impacts than what it would be for someone who's say past 25.
Oh, totally. That's absolutely crazy. I did not know 18-year-olds were competing, but I guess everything is starting earlier now these days. Wow.
100%.
God, I'm just looking at Sorry, what were you going to say, sorry?
Oh, I was just about to say, you should see some of these 18-year-olds physiques. Like, man, they are amazing. Like, bodybuilding is going to... Oh, they are changing the game because they're just, next level. Just, it's almost like our whole physiological, like our body as a human is just changing.
Yeah, well, I guess they just have so much more knowledge and resources than we did when we were 18. Like, God, when I was 18, the trend was still run on the treadmill so you get skinny. Like, no one was even talking about lifting weights. So it is nice to see that people are getting into the gym lifting weights, but I mean, you can still lift weights without competing. So it doesn't have to be the goal for everyone.
Everything in life is balance, and I truly believe that there is not one end of the spectrum for everything. It's a balance of everything.
Yeah, for sure. I was just looking at the time and I realized we've gone for so long. I know. And I feel like I could just talk to you like all day because you have so much to say, and you like your story is like, I already liked your page before, and now I'm like, because like you've gone through so much, and I feel like you're still working so much on yourself and growing every single day as a person. And like, I know that you've gotten a lot of hate comments and stuff like that, especially on like TikTok, which is ridiculous. But please, like, don't let them get to you ever. And I'm like, people are gonna love this podcast, and I'm so excited to share it with people. So thank you so much again for jumping on. If people want to find you, because I'm sure they're gonna want to check out your page, where should they go?
They should go to my Instagram's probably the better one with Madi Grace PT, but I also have a TikTok that's Madi Grace PT as well.
Awesome.
which is just a bit of everything. But yeah, that's pretty much me. If they ever message me about their stories, please expect a voice message. I can't text to save my life. It will be me voice messaging.
I love that. I love voice notes. Are you taking on new clients at the moment?
Yeah, I am. So I moved back into the fitness industry so that I can continue that goal of mine. And I work under the space of Astrophysiques, which is a female-only coaching business, which is also the head coach for that is Amanda Markson. And she's one of the only people in Australia who are actually qualified to program nutrition without some kind of a lot of people don't know this, but there are certain nutrition courses that are actually qualified to sports nutrition, or it expires within like a year or two, and they have to actually go get the degree. She's one of the only people who have the real accreditation to program for bodybuilding, and she's a bit of a mentor for me as well in the space. So I take on lifestyle clients, and I also take on the programming of comp prep clients, and she takes over the nutrition of the comp prep clients, so we can make sure we have that continuity of health.
Dream team, sounds like.
I know, yeah, which is, I think you guys, like Women's Fitness Academy is great at this as well, making sure that they have experts in the field to keep people in their scope.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again. I'm sure the listeners are going to love this podcast and take so much away from it. I know I definitely have. If you guys like this podcast, please make sure that you do screenshot and you do tag me, myself and Maddie and Women's Fitness Academy Australia. And yeah, tell us what you think and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you again, Maddie.
Thank you.
We'll talk next week, everyone.